Hello. Alright, let me share my screen here before we begin. Alright. Okay. So, good day to all of you. It's evening here in Malaysia, but I believe since we are from different continents, so good morning, afternoon, evening, and maybe good night to some of you. So, I am Muhammad Ashraf. Today I'm going to present a paper with the title of Review on Malaysia's Energy Legal Framework towards realizing Sustainable Development Goal 7 and also Sustainable Development Goal 13. So the author is me, and also together with my supervisor, Associate Professor Dr. Ashika Mat Khalid.
I'm sorry, I think you froze. We can't hear you.
Okay.
Let's see if it works better now.
Hello, I'm back. I'm so
Hi.
sorry.
Welcome back.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you and see you now.
Alright, so let me just start right away. Right, so without further ado, I am from Faculty of Law, University Kebangsaan Malaysia. So as you might see, that's why my title is more about legal framework. Alright, to begin with, basically I'm going to start with the introduction and then the methodology, result or finding, and also discussion as a conclusion. Yeah? So sustainability has been the it thing in the world since the adoption of Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations in 2015. And among the goals are Sustainable Development Goal 7, which is to increase the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix by 2030, and Sustainable Development Goal 13, that is to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. So these two Sustainable Development Goals are the one that I have been focusing on this paper or presentation today. Human activities are the reason for the rise of GHG emission over the last 150 years, and this is based from the report of IPCC in 2007. And burning of fossil fuels in the energy sector are the biggest contributor for the world GHG emission. So the research problem, so Malaysia is still relying heavily on fossil fuel as their sources of energy. And Malaysia has put a target to have 20% electricity generated from the renewable energy by 2025. However, as of 2019, the penetration level of renewable energy in Malaysia is only at 2%. When it comes to calculation here, let me put a caveat here. The previous government excluded large hydro as renewable energy, but the current government now is actually including the renewable and calculation for large hydro into the calculation. So despite having put in place various policies and law for its energy sector, however, the effort to reduce Malaysia's reliance on fossil fuels does not seem to work. Thus, this study will review the energy-related policies and laws to find out what can further be done to achieve SDG 7 and SDG 13. So the methods that I'll be using or I use in this paper is I use a doctrinal research where the researcher reviews the energy-related policies and laws in Malaysia. And the data for the review were obtained from primary and secondary sources, and the example of primary sources are the policies and also laws of Malaysia, obtained from the official government website. And meanwhile, examples for the secondary sources are journal articles from online databases such as Web of Science and Scopus, to name a few. These materials were then analyzed using the qualitative Atlas TI-8 software to obtain only relevant materials for the review, and this data were then analyzed using the legal content analysis method. So next is finding. So the first one is from the running of selected materials into Atlas TI-8. So first, I obtained the word cloud. So as you can see, very colorful there. So the size of the words displayed, for example, the word energy, policy, renewable, Malaysia, and national. So it means actually the frequency of the words appear in the selected materials. The bigger the size of the word, the higher the frequency of such word found in the selected materials. So based on this figure, energy, policy, renewable, and Malaysia are among the biggest in displayed, and as such, these materials are relevant for the purpose of this review. So this is basically a very fast skimming process that can be done using ISDRS. So you know by having those keywords that are relevant for your research, so it is actually save time for you to actually read it one by one. But after this, you still have to read it manually, but at least it saves one steps in the process. And secondly, this is also generated from ISDRS, which is the spider web. So the figure shows a spider web generated from the codes that has been put into one group named MY stands for Malaysia, Malaysia Energy Legal Framework. This is actually presented a nice view where the researchers can see what policies or laws that has been found for the purpose of this review. So this all these policies that you can see here are basically the policies or laws that are being discussed in this review. I'm not going to discuss it in detail one by one for the sake of time. Alright, moving on to the discussion part. First, there are three parts, so I'm going to look at the first part, which is on the effectiveness of the legal framework. So here, we're going to see what are actually the benefit that we get when we have a proper legal framework. So in total, there are 28 energy-related policies or laws formulated or enacted by Malaysia from 1974 until 2020. And Malaysia has depended on petroleum for its economic growth. For example, as in 1997, petroleum holds 50% shares in its energy mix. That's half. Yeah? And because of that, Malaysia enacted a Petroleum Development Act in 1974, where the purpose of this act is to control its oil and gas resources. And then Malaysia formulated a national depletion policy in 1980 and for fuel diversification policy in 1981. These two policies are basically to diversify Malaysia's energy mix in order to reduce reliance on fossil fuels. Next, Malaysia also formulated 5 fuel diversification policy in 2001, which is almost 20 years after the 4 fuel diversification policy, which is to further diversify its energy mix, to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, to achieve energy security and increase renewable energy shares in electricity generation. Where I would like to point out that in this 5 fuel diversification policy, Malaysia have put a target to have 5% electricity generated from renewable energy by 2005, and of course it failed. But all this national depletion policy, 4 fuel diversification policy, and also 5 fuel diversification policy is actually being formulated by Malaysia due to the uncertain oil crisis of the world. So, and also due to that worry basically, so we have that policy in place. So basically we can see from the formulation of the policy and also the law, these policies or the law is actually it allowing the government to set certain target for the renewable energy sector, for example in the 5 fuel diversification policy, and also it enables the government to provide funding to spur the industry. Secondly, on the effectiveness of the institutional framework. So we have the Energy Commission Act enacted in 2001. So from this act, Energy Commission, a body, was formed. So the body is actually one of its functions is to regulate the electricity and gas supply industry in Malaysia. And then we also have another act or law, Sustainable Energy Development Authority Act, enacted in 2011. And because of this act also, it enables Malaysia to form a body named a Sustainable Energy Development Authority, or SEDA. And SEDA was tasked to regulate the implementation of feed-in tariff system and to manage the Renewable Energy Fund. So where does the feed-in tariff system and Renewable Energy Fund come from, right? I mean, it doesn't come from thin air. So Renewable Energy Act 2011 introduced actually the feed-in system and also the Renewable Energy Fund. And this idea to have a feed-in tariff system in the first place and also the Renewable Energy Fund also doesn't come out of nowhere. So the idea is actually originated from the proposal made in the National Renewable Energy Policy and Action Plan 2009. So from this, it can safely be concluded that the policy actually provides for the overarching strategy for the effective implementation of the legal and institutional setup that follows. And lastly, on the discussion part, before we move to the conclusion, is with regards to hydrogen and fuel cell as a zero carbon energy. So hydrogen and fuel cell has been mentioned in the 9 Malaysia plan, which is a 5-year Malaysia development plan from 2006 until 2010, where in this plan, Malaysia is actually looking into a mechanism to how to support the hydrogen fuel cell industry. However, hydrogen fuel cell industry is no longer mentioned in the subsequent plan, which is 10 Malaysian plan and also 11 Malaysian plan. So by this, you can see or you can assume that when you are no longer mentioned in the development plan, then you are actually not being a priority anymore. You are not being prioritized by the government anymore. However, hydrogen fuel cell appeared in the National Transport Policy and also National Automotive Policy to 2020, where in National Transport Policy, the main is actually the goal is actually to reduce GHG emission by using cleaner fuels. And when we are talking about hydrogen fuel cell, we are talking about hydrogen, green hydrogen especially. And National Automotive Policy are looking into technological development in the automotive sector. And when it comes to hydrogen fuel cell, we are talking about the fuel cell itself. So Malaysia has actually the blueprint for fuel cell industry in Malaysia, which was produced by the Academy of Sciences Malaysia in 2017. However, since this is just a body created by the Act of Parliament of Malaysia, so they are not a government agency or whatnot. So although they made a very good blueprint for the development of hydrogen and fuel cell industry in Malaysia, but since the government has not adopted it as part of their policy, so we can see that without it, hydrogen fuel cell industry would never be a priority for the government. And policies and law are needed to develop any sector or industry, and policy will provide the direction of what needs to be done, while the law will provide a proper regulatory body where proper regulatory body can be formed, sufficient fund can be channeled, and safety requirements can be properly established. Hydrogen fuel cell industry as a new industry need a proper policy and subsequently a law to regulate its development. Hydrogen fuel cell industry are not only for electricity generation, for example, Renewable Energy Act only caters for electricity generation, but HFC is not for electricity generation only, but for the whole energy sector. Thus, a proper legal framework is needed. Investment into producing green hydrogen, which is from renewable energy sources, which is to be used in the fuel cell, will have a domino effect where it will be an investment in the renewable energy sector. And the increase of renewable energy production is actually in line with SDG 7, and moving towards hydrogen fuel cell industry will be in line with Sustainable Development Goal 13 on climate change. So as a conclusion, Malaysia's energy mix is still dominated by fossil fuels, where it is the source of GHG emission. As such, Malaysia still has not achieved a sustainable energy sector. More need to be done in terms of streamlining the legal framework with the implementation agency on the ground, and only then the policies and the laws can be crystallized in a more effective and efficient manner. it is recommended that Malaysia move towards the hydrogen fuel cell industry to take the benefit of it, which is to reduce its GHG emissions and also increasing the shares of renewable energy in its energy mix. With that, thank you for listening, and I'll be happy to take any question, if any.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for more detailed information about the all aspects, legal and strategy aspects, really how Malaysia is going to achieve sustainable energy or renewable energy. I'm from Poland, by the way, so Poland is also dealing with some achievements to reach the renewable energy 20%. We have higher than you now, but I think one of the most important aspects is the safety aspect, energy safety. And did you analyze or have you analyzed because as I understand, Malaysia has own sources of oil, yeah?
Yes,
for energy production. Yeah?
Yes.
So in Poland, we have a big deposit of coal. And it's always big discussion between the coal deposit, use of Polish coal deposit, which will be closed in 2040. So own sources. So is there any aspect of safety in case of energy, of safety of minerals, of raw materials in your legislation or strategy? Have you talked about it? Did you analyze it?
All right. So very good question on safety aspect. I have not analyzed with regards to because I only analyze it when it comes to law. But this is actually this research is actually part of my PhD thesis, where I would recommend or formulate a policy framework for hydrogen fuel cell industry. So for the hydrogen fuel cell industry, I did look into the safety aspect of the hydrogen production, transport and also use, and then also for the fuel cell itself. So so I think I cannot, or I'm unable to answer your question on a safety aspect as a general energy sector as a whole. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so I recommend to look on the policy to first in your PhD to try to do. If I'm right, Malaysia is a rich country in oil. Yeah, is that true?
Yes, it's true.
Okay. If it's true, so let's please look at the policy from the beginning of your PhD on the countries which are rich in fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always big discussion. Yeah, of course, renewable is needed, and we go this direction.
Mm-hmm.
But then the job loss in the traditional fossil fuel, yeah, in this sector. Maybe it's anyway connected. So what I recommended to look also at strategy and legislation in that aspect. Maybe it would be helpful to see on the different side.
Yes.
Okay, I would like to start the discussion for this even controversial subject. Maybe someone from the floor would like to ask the question. Any chat information? Nothing in chat. I can't see anyone who would like to ask the question. Someone to discuss, to get some comments. Sorry, no more. So no more. Enjoy your work. And what about the weather with you? Because in Europe now in Krakow we have big storm and raining. What about in your country? It's hot.
It's hot, but now I think every day there will be rain. So now we can no longer predict because usually you have the season where you can predict, like for this 4 months it's going to be rain, for this 4 months it's going to be hot. But now every day is also raining.
It's okay. So thank you very much. Then we go to
Thank you so much.
The presentation would be a about the exploring the advocate journalist role in achieving affordable and clean